There are lots of misconceptions and sometimes even outright lies floating around the menswear space that are just often repeated without being challenged. So in today's video, I want to focus on 3 of the most common examples and explain why I believe that you can ignore them. You either have style or you don't. I'm pretty sure you've heard the saying before. Basically, what they're saying is that dressing well is an inherent quality, meaning that it's something that cannot be taught. You either have it or you don't. Now, of course, as with pretty much every skill in life, there are going to be some people who have a more natural tendency toward this and some others where it's going to be more difficult. But I truly believe that every single person can learn how to dress better. I think it's a pretty ridiculous notion because humans can learn some pretty amazing things. You can learn to play the piano, speak different languages, and run ultra marathons. All of these can take years and sometimes even decades to master. And they're certainly a lot more complicated and time intensive than learning how to dress. Because there are certain guidelines and principles and also outfit combinations that you can pick up relatively quickly, and that way you can improve the way you dress within a matter of days or weeks even. And there are lots of great resources out there. You can try different books. For example, Dressing the Man by Alan Flusser is one example, or The Handbook of Style by Esquire, which is a small book, but it's a really great introduction to menswear. Of course, there are many different blogs that can teach you how to dress better. For example, Permanent Style would be a good option. You could also join Style Forum, where you can actually observe people that are much further along the journey than you are. You can ask questions, you can get feedback. And then of course there are many different YouTube channels where you can learn from. You have Bespoke Style, you have Justin Kwan, you have Luke Hodges, for example. You also have Instagram and Pinterest, and those are really useful to train your eye to figure out what piques your interest. So you can learn which styles that you like. You can try to figure out why certain things work on other people. And that way you can just learn about the principles of style. You can learn about some of the guidelines and rules and relatively quickly improve the way you dress. You need money to dress well. That's another very common saying, and I have to admit there's some truth to it, but there are also a lot of counterexamples as to why this is not the case. The main argument against this would be thrifting, because thrifting is really the only way that you can build a pretty impressive wardrobe for a very limited or small budget. With a little bit of patience and luck, you can find items for as low as $1 or $2. And that way you really build quite a large wardrobe. I personally buy a lot of items secondhand, and a friend of mine has a really impressive collection of Suit Supply suits and sport jackets that he bought for about 80 to 90% less than their retail value. And the best part is that when he doesn't like them anymore or he wants some new items, he just sells them pretty much for the same price that he bought them for, and he just buys another item and he barely lost any money in the process. So in order to dress well, you don't need a lot of money because you can find pretty much anything you need on the secondhand market. Dressing well is more about the correct principles, for example, the right fit, choosing and combining the correct fabrics and colors, than it is about the size of your wallet. Another counterexample, of course, would be wealthy people who dress poorly. A great example would be Tom Billieux from the Quest Bar company. I personally enjoy their protein bars, and I don't want to judge him as a person, only the way he dresses. I think we can all agree that he's not a great dresser, even though he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And then of course there are many celebrities who are also quite wealthy and they have a really poor sense of style. So money doesn't always equal style, and not having money doesn't mean that you cannot develop style. However, I need to point out that money can definitely help, because if your budget allows to buy from brands like Drake's, Natalino or Birkenberg, and you build your entire wardrobe from these brands, then it's pretty difficult to be a bad dresser. And I also need to point out that for pretty much every example here, there are always a couple of exceptions. Thrifting is amazing, but for some people it may not work. First of all, I know that in some countries and some cities, the secondhand market is almost non-existent. And then secondly, there are some people who simply have a very unusual size. For example, let's take somebody who's really tall. Let's say somebody 6'6" or above. They're going to have a hard time finding clothes that fit them anyway. It doesn't matter whether you buy them new or secondhand. In the end, they probably have to go with the made-to-measure or bespoke route, and that's always going to be expensive. So if you fall in the extremes with sizes that are hard to find secondhand, then yes, it might not be the best option for you. And then of course the saying is going to be true in the end, that you need money to dress well. But I would love to hear your opinion on this. Do you believe that you need a lot of money to dress well, or do you think that you can dress well even if you have a really limited budget? Let me know in the comments below. I'm sure you've heard the next saying as well. Shoes are the most important item in an outfit. And it's also the first item that women notice. Now, personally, I don't believe that there's a single item that's the most important one, because in the end, the entire presentation, the entire outfit is important. The way you present yourself, your grooming, how clean the clothes are, how everything fits, all of this has to match. And if it's not correct, then it cannot be saved by one good item. For example, let's assume that somebody wears a really cheap looking polyester suit that also doesn't properly fit them, but they are wearing an amazing pair of shoes. Do you think that it would save the outfit? Probably not, right? I would even argue that in that situation, the suit is more important. If you wear a suit that fits you well and that looks great, but then you wear some entry-level shoes, maybe even ones that you bought secondhand, I think the shoes are less important in this case than the suit. But then I would also not say that the suit is the most important item. I personally believe that there are certain items where it makes sense to invest a little bit more, because you can really tell the cheaply made ones from the quality ones. And then there are some items where you don't notice it as much. Now, which items belong to the first group? In my opinion, shoes fall into this category, as well as sport jackets and suits. Coats are another example. And then also leatherwear can also fit you. And that's because with these items, you can really tell the difference. But then there are other items where most people won't be able to tell the difference. That would be t-shirts, some trousers and some shirts, as well as knitwear. Most people won't be able to tell the difference between a Uniqlo t-shirt and then one from a really high quality brand. Only you would be able to tell, because you're the one wearing it. But then if you take a pair of shoes or a suit that you bought at a brand like Zara or Uniqlo, and then you compare to another brand that specializes in those cases, the difference is really obvious. That's why I believe it's worth to see some items as investment pieces and try to spend the bulk of your budget on those. But then again, many times you can find them on the secondhand market for a really reasonable price. Gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I would love to hear your opinion on these common beliefs in menswear. And if there are any others that you think should be on the list, leave them in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.